We'd love to also know who's in the room. So if you can just drop your name in the chat and the organization that you're with, that will be great. And you obviously use this opportunity to connect with each other as well. So we'll get started. My name is Charlene Carter-James. I'm the Partnerships and Development Manager at Culture Central. I'm a Black woman with Black Afro hair, and it's tied up in a kind of tan-coloured head wrap. You probably can't see my dress, but I'm wearing like a green stripy jumper dress. I'll give you a little bit of an idea of the webinar overview. So this is an overview of today's session. We'll have a little bit of time for a short Q&A at the end, but if you have any questions as you go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and my colleague Yaz and I will also look at what comes up, so at the end we can call them out. Oops, I've gone a bit too far. So I'll tell you a little bit. So we've got some great presenters today. We're going to have a case study of Moseley Road Baths, and we're going to have another look at another amazing project with a heritage focus called To the Streets through Paul from China Plate. And we're also going to have the principles of project accessibility, and that will be presented by Stephanie later on this afternoon. So I'll tell you a little bit about the program. So as part of Cultivate Heritage program, this webinar is part of a series of activities that we're doing to raise awareness of National Lottery's recently launched grant program. And today we're emphasizing the importance of one of 4 of their investment principles: inclusion, access, and participation. And that's with an aim of supporting creative programming approaches to heritage. And that's with a view that the arts and heritage and creative adjacent organisations will apply for the funding with an ambitious project. And this will be part of the legacy of the Birmingham 2022 festival. If anyone can remember that, it's a little bit of a distant memory, but we're still pushing the legacy of the games. And it would be fantastic if out of this activity that we're doing, that some people are inspired to do some really creative projects with heritage. Lots of collaborations and connections are made off the back of this, and hopefully you'll have a really competitive application for the new Heritage Grants Programme. What I wanted to do before we get into the presentations is just have a quick look at the investment principles, just so that we're clear around what then under the new Heritage Lottery strategy is, what that looks like now. So before, under the old mechanism, it looked very different. Now they've kind of condensed everything into 4 main investment principles, and that's saving heritage, protecting the environment, organizational sustainability, and inclusion, access, and participation. So all 4 of these investment principles do need to be taken into account. So although we're just focusing on one today, it really is up to the applicant to decide the strength and focus of each of those. As long as they're all included, you can still demonstrate a stronger focus on one particular investment principle. So we can look at that in a little bit more detail. So this is what Heritage Lottery says. This is what they mean by inclusion, access, and participation. So I've pulled this directly from their website. And essentially what they mean by inclusion, access, and participation, I've kind of underlined some of the areas that we're going to be touching on today. So there's things around like heritage for people and investing in volunteering, heritage careers, co-creating projects, leadership, knowledge, and skills. Also around removing barriers to access and participation. So for people that we would, like as Culture Central would say, we would use the term traditionally excluded from the sector. They use the term people underserved by heritage, and allowing different audiences to explore and share their heritage in the same way. And that's with a focus of stories as well. And the Cultivate Heritage programme has an emphasis on supporting partnerships and collaborations and co-creations to support inclusion. And with the 2033 Heritage strategy, Heritage Lottery want to increase diversity, remove barriers, and enabling everyone's heritage to be recognized. And there is a bit of a focus around like making accessible through technology, so digital, creative digital uses, to making heritage more accessible to different audiences. So that's a little bit more in detail. I can also send you an overview of all of this in a separate document for you to have, so that just so that you're clear on the investment principles, because I wouldn't want anyone to miss out through misinterpretation. But so that's it. I'll tell you a little bit before I hand over to our amazing presenters today. I mentioned we have Phoebe Gilmore, who is the program and development manager at Moseley Road, Bath, and I will be handing over to them to give us a little bit of a case study. We've got Stephanie Tyrrell, we've got Paul Warwick, who will be giving us some really great, really interesting projects that they've delivered with a heritage focus, and touching on inclusion, access, and demonstrating how this could be done within your own projects as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Phoebe.
Hi, yeah, so as Charlene said, I'm Phoebe. I'm the Public Programme Development Manager here at Moseley Road, Bath. I'm going to apologise if there's any background sound. I co-work currently out of the National Trust offices based in the Roundhouse, and I saw someone from the Roundhouse is here. Hello. I'm a white person with pale skin, mousy brown hair, currently slicked back in a bun, and a pair of cycling sunglasses that do not come off my head. I'm pretty sure they are a permanent fixture. I'm just gonna share my screen. So the Moseley Road Baths is give you a bit of context about the organisation itself. The building was opened in 1907. It is a public bathhouse and swimming pool. It was originally segregated via class and gender: men's first class, men's second class, and women's. And that is on the facade of the building as well. And it has continuously hosted swimming, and I think is the only public pool built before World War I to have continuously hosted swimming. And it has also been used for several functions throughout over the century that it's existed, and hosted a variety of activities alongside swimming and bathing. The diving, it was left in over a period of that 116, 17 years. It was left in a period of sort of disrepair, and in 2006 the Friends of Moseley Road Baths were formed to campaign to save it, and after a decade of relentless and persistent community activism and campaigning, it was listed on the World Monuments Fund Heritage at Risk Register, which is an international register. That's sort of the catalyst moment for a whole slurry of partners coming around the table to save the building, and it's now undergoing a £32.7 million capital restoration programme along with the library as well, which is directly next door to it, and it appears as one building. So with that, it's split into two phases, and what's called the activity programme or the creative programme is also split into two phases. There's the development phase up front. Let me see if the screen will, which is round one. This is max 2-year duration. It's sort of a research phase, a lot of consultation. Who are our audiences? Who are not our audiences? What do people want? And that goes across everything. That goes across the capital works and designs themselves. It goes across the activities, and it also goes into the operational consideration of the building as well, and what that business plan will look like. The second phase is max 5 years, and that's sort of the delivery of everything we've learned over the past 2 years, all culminating, and that's still to come. Just to talk a little about the capital works, because it'd be amiss to not mention them. the access is woven through the capital designs as well. So that includes sort of retrofitting, lift access, ramp access, and also widening doorways. Doorways were a lot smaller, and so instilling that building best practice through that as well. So we've just undergone a bit of business planning, and it's really important that that is done. Just to give you a slight overview, swimming's at the beating heart of what we do. Our spaces are packed with diverse programs. We're proud of our heritage, and we're inspired and operate with and for local communities. It's the very existence of the CIO itself. It exists because of community activism and active participation. We are still owned by the City Council, but we are operated as the charity. Our approach to heritage. So the Heritage Fund themselves let you define heritage, but Most Road Baths remains an operational swimming pool, and that's crucial to visitors understanding the history and heritage of the building. We believe heritage is not static, it is constantly in motion, and it also reveals something about the very here and now, and today, as well as the past, and how can we articulate that future through how we practice operations today. And so we've done that through piloting a variety of socially engaged approaches, including co-design, co-creation, steering groups, consultation, and that really changes the authorship of who gets to author that heritage and how's that value assigned or unassigned through that process, what matters to people through that process of co-design, co-creation and consultation. A little bit about our approach to participation as well. Participation is something we value from people just walking in and out again, being curious, and being curious is sort of centered at this all the way through to being a trustee, which they're sort of the opposite ends of the scale, but one isn't valued more than the other. But they do come with different levels of responsibility and levels of engagement. So just to talk about our pilot program. So over the past 14 months, time keeps passing, so I have to keep extending that. Over the past 14 months, we ran 4 pilot projects. So the first of all was the slipper bath pilot, and this was about reanimating one of the original slipper bath cubicles. Don't think Roman bathing, think individual private slipper bath cubicles, and to work out exactly who would be able to access these in a building that currently doesn't have the retrofitting, and what would that offer look like beyond a bath, and people who are easily access and have the means to do so, that experience. So we went out and consulted with 6 different groups, 91 different people, and sort of said what would this experience look like to you, and centering the concept of necessary luxury or public luxury within that. We also, so that culminated in you know, people really experiencing really centering what's that experience, and actually it was about how to tailor that, and how could we do that. So we put a speaker in the mirror so people could connect to the speaker and pick what they chose, and it sort of, that experience was from door to door, guided. Being naked in a public building is quite a vulnerable thing, and so actually ensuring the operational safety was the first thing that came through with that process. We also then had Balsall Heath living room pilot, which was a third space project about very literally, not conceptually, turning an emptied gala pool into a living room space. We delivered this with a huge amount of partnerships, and that's really crucial, is that there were 12 organisations with a paid partnership involved, and that's 63 freelancer opportunities within that. And that was 3 months of design, build and programming, as well as no programming, to allow that curiosity in living room space. I think here you can see there's some images on the screen. There's an 8-foot TV screen, which had 3 channels curated by Flatpak. We had beautiful wall hangings, which were commissioned by Art Gallery by Nilupa Yasmin. And then Friction Arts sort of glued all of those pieces together to create this living room. There were, over those 3 months, there were 421 visits. I think the key here is this was previously an area of the bath that wasn't continuously opened. It was sort of padlocked. We'd open it just for our weekly programming, things such as capoeira or floristry, and that was built, this project was built on those existing relationships and activities that we'd sort of been increasing over a period of 3 years before that. We also had within the living room a previously unused courtyard space, and this partnership was with Parakeet about co-creating a child-led space. And what would a child-led and accessible space look like for this courtyard, and how could we alleviate parents from that, and play was something that really came through, and self-led play. And that's actually something that we've taken away. This was sort of a gem in the project that's going to lead to more policy work around having a play policy. How do we centre a play workers approach to risk for children and play? How do we make sure that play is accessible in an area where the green spaces aren't look as cared for as other green spaces within the city? Borsall Heath, where the baths is situated, has one of the highest levels of environmental justice, which means there is a real lack of green space in Birmingham City as a council. We then had the Imaginarium pilot. This partnership was really key. So I mentioned originally that we consulted with 99 people for the slipper baths. Well, one of those groups was BH Cats, which is Borsall Heath Child Action Team. And it's a coalition of parents with disabled children who campaign and take action to ensure that their children have access to public spaces and activities. And it was very apparent that we would not be able, in our current format, to provide them a bath. They wouldn't be able to take their children into the baths, and for it to be a safe space for them to do that. And we, in partnership with the library, realised that the library in its current form is ostensibly physically accessible, but there is a lot of apprehension about the rules, the unwritten rules of a library. And so it was very apparent that there had to be a clear cue, an invitation to play. And this is where that play comes back into it. So we commissioned a sculpture, an interactive sculpture with intervention architecture, an open theatre. That sculpture took that approach to participation from individual curiosity, just looking at something, all the way through to being the backdrop of an immersive theatre performance, and sort of revealing and reimagining performance and storytelling and the role of world building in libraries. Open theatre were an essential partnership on many fronts. They also helped us develop a more accessible offer for volunteers, and trained 2 of our staff members. They supported us with the actual co-design of this sculpture. We worked with school children from Uffculme and Calthorpe, as well as BH Cats, and sort of consulted and got their feedback. And so this culminated in this sculpture that sat within the library and currently sits within a local primary school in their library, as we're currently closed for restoration. The sculpture itself was longlisted for a Reba McEwen Award, and it's sort of something that will embed further into the library, with future activities really centering how do we make an environmental and experiential welcome. It's great having ramps and automatic doors, but if your visit you feel like you can't be yourself, then that is another barrier. So it's consulting, noticing and finding out barriers, and then taking that creative approach, in whatever form that takes, to remove those and actively, explicitly invite people and open up that permission. Alongside this, we had a festival, 2-day mini festival, which was programmed via a steering group, a local steering group put together, and it went all the way from arts and crafts to comedy in the evening. There wasn't anything that we weren't interested in, and sort of taking that approach of, we will have a conversation, we will take absolutely everyone and their ideas seriously, and then we will follow through with that. And sort of not knowing what that festival would look like, we knew it would be an exchange of ideas. It's not just about us filling up people as an empty cup with information about the heritage and the history of Borsall Heath Library and Moseley Road, Baths, but actually what are we learning, and really having big ears with that one. And then finally, we had our Young Curators pilot. This originally stemmed from young people often being assigned the future and the weight that comes with an impending future, and the fear that comes with. And actually, young people have agency here and now. So what's the structure and process we can do to give young people authorship and ownership of heritage and history and the here and now, not just that future? And so this was an open invitation to young people aged 18 to 30. There was 2 stipulations, so that age range, and you had to be within a 15-minute radius of the baths. We didn't say whether by foot, bus, it was just a 15-minute radius. That had a large amount of applicants, and we whittled them down to these lovely 6 young people, and we provided a development program around that and brought in experts and specialists from the heritage field, from people who make change, as well as also artistic and creative practitioners, sort of taking that wider holistic view for people. So it sort of, we're asking them what do they want to know, and providing that scaffold for them to be able to develop and deliver a project. Another stipulation was that the output had to be digital, and we sort of didn't, we gave them a budget, an idea, a producer, a mentor, and all of these development opportunities, and said we want to know what you come up with, and sort of gave them access to our archives, and that resulted in bathcasts. They interviewed people in the bath about their relationship to Borsall Heath, to themselves, to the baths if they have one, and there was also micro commissions within that, asking local artists, some 6 poets and 6 musicians or sound artists, to then create a creative response that would go into the podcast. Give it a listen. And we had a live launch of that. And we sort of wanted to partner with a heritage organisation that had a similar heritage of community activism, as well as a swimming pool. And so we partnered with Govan Hill Baths in Glasgow. I think overall for the whole programme, there is near 300 freelancer opportunities and over 30 paid partnerships with organisations. So the sort of timescale we delivered in was really short, and that couldn't have been done without the expertise and partnerships. And it's also really key here that we brought in fresh eyes. Everyone resaw what we were seeing every day. And that's where that exciting value-led creative responses come through to that. But that, as I mentioned, is sort of all the way through diving in as a whole wider master project. If you can see the amount of partners at the bottom of the PowerPoint slide, we are literally wall to wall with partners. So we have professional consultancy teams, we have the National Trust sort of project managing the capital work side, as well as the activity team. There is a whole coalition of partners, as well as a historic pools partnership that we constantly communicate with. A lot of the times the best ideas are adopted, and we invite people to adopt our ideas too. There's no one set way, and we're only better with learning more. For the programme itself, we had quite an emphasis on hyper-local partnerships and those regional partnerships, and sort of not letting that knowledge that is stored within the West Midlands and Birmingham itself, with a deep freelancer base and a huge variety of organisations, not letting that sort of disperse too far out. And it was really important that we approached people with the same values and the same sort of direction towards, we're constantly learning and we want to constantly get better. There are things that absolutely went wrong, and there are things that we will embed in the future with learning through those partnerships. We also then are currently forming more international partnerships. So here it's a screenshot of us having a Zoom call with a team in Tokyo who have a shared heritage of bathing culture, but actually that has declined too, and they've taken a third space approach, this one specific bathhouse in Tokyo. And so how can we collaborate internationally? What does that mean for Moseley Road Baths and our other partnerships, and that as well as Herbal, which is in Iraqi Kurdistan. All of these partnerships and all of these people have been really integral to how we approach and reapproach. And I come back to that sort of approach to heritage not being static and to being a value. And then also that participation approach, from just seeing the baths to actively being a trustee and having responsibility for the governance, as well as, you know, drawing a picture of the baths and sharing that all of those are valued, and we don't underestimate those opportunities for the baths to learn through that. And so we now currently have 3 curatorial lines that our programme going forward will lie against, which is the stories of Moseley Road Baths and Borsall Heath, which is about the people, a place for belonging, and that's also about the process of how we do that through steering groups, through paid opportunities and volunteering. And then the here and now, that context heritage, I think, can often get bogged down with trying to give thesis level information about a niche topic to absolutely everyone who walks through the door. And it's really important that we don't forget that we're revealing something about our society and how we interact and how we have relationships now. I think that's it. I am open to questions, and I'm sure there's about 1,000 things I have forgot.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. This, like, I feel like I've said this before. I feel like Moseley Road Baths and what you and the team have done to it has been a masterclass in inclusion, access, and participation. Especially when the building itself has such a historical history of segregation and inaccessibility and exclusion, that you've managed to make it really, really exclusive, and that all of the partnerships that you've been able to establish have added value, and you've had this constant interrogation of your processes and how you do things, which is amazing. And I hope there's people in the room that are inspired by that. Thank you again. So moving on, this particular project for me, I feel like is, when I learnt about it, when I first joined at Culture Central, Paul and I had a conversation, and I was astounded by the level of like community engagement, especially a community that was so like difficult to kind of embed themselves in, was able to be such a success. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, who is going to present for us and give us some insights into to the streets. Is that right? To the streets.
That's
Yeah,
it.
brilliant.
Let me just get some slides up. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name's Paul. I'm one of the co-artistic directors at China Plate, based down in Digbeth, and I am a white man in his 50s, although not in that photograph that's in this slide. That probably needs a bit of updating. Got a bit more hair in that photograph. So yeah, I'm a white man in black clothes with some blonde hair left. So the bit that I've been asked to talk about is about participation, and all of these projects connect to heritage in slightly different ways, but I'm going to focus on the ways in which we manage encouraging people to participate with the programme of work, and then the impact that that participation had on attendance at the big project that these projects sat around. But before I do that, I think most of you probably know us, but I'll just do a quick intro to who China Plate are. So China Plate is an independent theatre studio based in Birmingham. We work across the UK. We produce and tour theatre shows. We do a lot of artist development. We do a lot of production development. We also run various producer training programs that we call our producer pathways. And we are engaged in a number of kind of projects or initiatives to try and influence the sector, to try and turn the sector into a better place to make work and to work. It's probably useful to know how the sort of scale of the organisation, given what I'm going to talk about. So China Plate is comparatively, I think, in the region, a fairly small organisation. We have a core team currently of 12. We employ about 200 freelancers a year, and our turnover hovers around about $1 million. We're a charity, and we're part of Arts Council England's national portfolio of organisations, and we've been going for about 20 years. So sort of the main thing that China Plate was set up to do was to make shows, theatre shows. But the way in which we've done that, or who's involved in the process of making a show, at what point they're involved in that process, that's changed massively over the 18 years that we've been running. And it's that really that I think is the way into us thinking about participation as part of the brief for this talk. So like most organisations working in theatre, 18 odd years ago, we thought that our job was to put artists at the centre of everything that we did. And we saw the function of the company as being about facilitating and servicing the vision of artists. So crudely put, my job was basically trying to remove as many of the barriers as I could to artists having the best possible experience making a piece of work. That has shifted over recent years. Obviously, artists are still hugely important and valued in the work that we do because we're making art. But now we see our job as building what we call creative communities around projects and ideas. Now, who those creative communities are, or who's in those creative communities, is different for every project that we do. It could include communities of place, it could include communities of interest, or communities defined in some other way, depending on the needs of the project and the idea. For most of you on the on the Zoom, it will be self-evident as to why we've made that shift. Like many organisations, we've been thinking hard over recent years about who participates in the work that we do, and even harder about those who don't. I think the analysis of Theatre in England report in 2016 was a huge wake-up call to all of us, when it was really clearly laid out that something we all knew was happening anyway, that everyone pays taxes, lots of people buy lottery tickets, but only a tiny fraction of those people engage in the cultural activities that are funded through that finance. So we've been looking at different strategies for tackling that over recent years. One that we found really helpful is what the brief for this session called co-design, but what we tend to call co-creation at China Play. And I think there is a real growing body of evidence, and actually the Commonwealth Games evidence was really helpful here, to suggest that it's true that the more people are involved in the creation of culture, the more likely they are to participate in that culture in some way. So again, I'm not going to teach grandmothers to suck eggs here. I'm imagining we're all pretty much on the same page with that. That is very much encapsulated in our new mission statement. So China Play's mission is all about opening up the way performance is made, who makes it, and who's experienced by it. And that's been our mission statement for a number of years. It's something that we think about on every project that we're doing. So you can see how participation isn't just integral for us in terms of who experiences the work at the end of it, but actually how people are engaged in that process throughout. I'm also aware, this is going to be a very brief point, but I'm aware that co-creation, co-design, these terms mean different things to different people. They can sometimes be problematic, and depending on the person who's talking, the people you're working with, or the context you're working in, that can mean different things. So broadly speaking, for China Plate, when we're talking about co-creation, we're talking about a sliding scale that we use that has basically, at one end of the scale, artists-led work. So this is work that's ostensibly being made for people. At the other end, we have work that's participant-led. So this is work that's being made by people. But most of our work sits somewhere in the middle, where we're working with those creative communities that I described to make work with people. So the majority of China Plate's work sits in that space. So probably the easiest thing for me to do is to do what I was asked to do, which is to talk about the project, the To the Streets project, which brings some of that into focus. So for those of you that don't know, To the Streets is a new British musical that we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years. It tells the incredible true story of the 1963 Bristol bus boycott, told through the music of the time, so ska, calypso, rock and roll. And this story is a really historic moment in British civil rights. I always think of it as the UK's Rosa Parks moment, if you like. And that moment and all the amazing people that were part of that movement then and to this day are celebrated in this 2-act full-scale musical. And this show was commissioned as part of the Birmingham 2022 festival. So what we had is a story that was really focusing on Caribbean and to some extent South Asian communities, initially in Bristol, but also in other cities that we were working with to make this show. And of course, we wanted those communities to be engaged in not only seeing the show, but in the creation of that show as well. Those communities, and this is a bit of a generalization, I'm aware this is a hugely complex area, but for the purposes of 20 minutes, these communities are communities who have been excluded from cultural participation for decades. So how do we get them to engage with this piece of work? Well, the first thing that we did, as you can see from this picture here, is that we decided that we wouldn't perform this show in theatres in town. We co-produced the show with the Birmingham Hippodrome, and they were very open to the idea that we don't perform it in their building, but that we perform the show open air in parks in Birmingham, Coventry and Wolverhampton. So that is part of the first part of our mission, which is about trying to open up who the work is experienced by And that's simply about making it as easy as possible for people to engage with the work. This is what the Arts Council calls culture on your doorstep. Not a term that I particularly love, but it's one that serves in this case and was relatively successful. But then if we think about the rest of our mission, thinking about how we open up how the work is made and who makes it and how we give people agency in that process, that's the bit where participation really came into play for us around this project. So I'm going to take Handsworth and the work that we did in Handsworth as the example here. So one of the things we were really anxious not to do with this project was kind of helicopter into Handsworth as part of the Commonwealth Games programme with a big show and then disappear again afterwards. We didn't think that was ethically the right thing to do, and we didn't think it would be successful in terms of audience development. So we wanted to find ways to build relationships with that community. We wanted to find all those communities. We wanted to find ways to invite them into that creative process and also to give them agency over that community process. This took a long time. So one of the things I would say about really doing co-design, co-creation is that it takes a lot of resource and it takes a lot of time. So 2 years before the show was due to land in the Commonwealth Games programme, we hired 2 associate producers, Deandra McCalla and Oksana Khan, who knew the communities in Handsworth well. In one case, they were from those communities and they had relevant lived experience. So it was important to be thinking about who is going to be walking into those communities and how they'll be received. They spent 6 months basically getting to know those communities, building connections, building trust, having conversations, finding out what people thought about some of the themes that were part of the show that we were trying to make, and finding out what they thought about that, what they wanted to do, what they felt their community needed, and really importantly, what they felt the challenges were like, what they thought the challenges were or the barriers to them in terms of participation. So those conversations led to Deandra and Oksana coming back to us with 6 possible projects that those communities had co-designed, and then some basic kind of scoping work about what each of those projects might look like. In August 2021, we then hosted something which we called the Block Party, which was a free day-long event in the gardens of Soho House in Handsworth. And this was really an opportunity to kind of speak back to the community about what we'd heard and what we'd listened to over the previous 6 months. So that was a day of food and music. We premiered the first 5 songs from the musical at that event. So literally the first people in the world ever to hear that music were the people who came to that free event in Handsworth that day, which we hoped was saying something about how serious we were about those communities being honoured and engaged by that piece of work. But we also ran taster sessions with a group of artists around each of those 6 ideas that had emerged from our conversations. We also did things like provided a food bank for the day. We made it as easy as possible for people to come, and looked at multiple different ways or multiple different motivations for people to come and see that activity. Based on the feedback and the learning from the Block Party, we identified the 3 projects that we felt had the legs to go forward from the 6. And then we began the process of working with partners to raise the funding to make those 3 projects happen. 2 of them became Creative City projects, and 1 of them became a cultural action zone funded in partnership with the local business improvement district, but funded through what was Greater Birmingham and Solihull LEP. So these projects, although they have a heritage focus, they're not specifically funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund. At that point, we recruited additional staff to be part of that team. So that's when brilliant producer Jade Samuels came on board to work alongside Jade and Oksana. And we set up focus groups in the community. Phoebe mentioned the importance of focus groups as well. We found them incredibly impactful as part of this project. So focus groups attached to each of those projects. And we recruited the artists at that point who would maybe be able to come on board and help to make those projects happen. So the 3 projects that we delivered with those communities, the first one was a project called Soho Settlers. So this is a project that's looking at Handsworth's history of migration and the kind of intangible heritage that comes with that. So waves and waves and waves and waves of migration through that part of Birmingham from the 1950s all the way through to today. And what we worked with 2 brilliant organisations over here, who are a poetry organisation that work largely digitally and have some brilliant sort of tech wizardry, and Black Heritage Walks Network, who do a lot of work around Black heritage, but were particularly interested in this project in broadening their work to look at other migration stories in Handsworth as well as the Black story. So that project became a bit like Pokemon Go, really. So in the end, what we had is what I like to think of as kind of digital blue plaques. So you can go around Handsworth and you can collect on your mobile phone pins, and each pin has either a piece of creative writing, an interview, a story that somehow speaks to the different communities who have arrived in Handsworth over the last 70, 80 years. And that's, that project, so it was called Soho Settlers, and it's still available today. It was a really exciting piece of work, and really unveiled some fantastic stories from that community. But that's Soho Settlers. I'm going to spend a bit more time talking about the third one, but moving on to our second project. So this time we were working with an artist called Jane Takordin, who ran a project called We Still Here. So this was now, this is a kind of crafts meets activism project, which is Jane's area of work. Jane's particularly interested in handcrafting beautiful protest banners, one of which you can see here. And she worked with groups of residents in Ladywood for months to run sessions where basically Jane's thing is, she talks about having busy hands and open mouths. So the idea is that people were learning to craft, they were learning skills, but as part of those conversations, so as part of that process, they're sitting together for periods of time, having cups of tea and talking about their lives, their communities, and what's important to them. And over time, Jane is amazingly skilled at taking the subjects of those conversations and weaving them into the fabric of those banners that were then exhibited at the To the Streets site, but also in a number of other places, and then ultimately returned to the community sites where they were made. And here we were working with different community groups, we were working with food banks, we were working with schools, a whole bunch of different organisations and grassroots groups that came to work with Jane on that project. Oh, and the bus drivers. Jane's dad had actually been, so Jane's father came from Guyana and had been a bus driver in the city in the 60s. So we were really interested in making sure that we worked with some bus drivers as well. So that's that one. Then the third project is a project called On Our Way. Oh, my slides are not behaving. So On Our Way was a project involving bus stops. So that you can see how each of these projects speaks to the themes of the To the Streets musical, so about protest, about migration, about buses, but each of them had kind of been taken by that community in Handsworth and Ladywood and developed to fit their context. So On Our Way is a project where we worked with the wonderful artist curator Nalupa Yasmin, who worked with 8 different community groups in Handsworth to design the stained glass windows basically that were fitted to bus stops and actually still there. We initially envisaged that they would be there just for the games period, but they're still there to this day. So each one is designed by a different group in the community, and each one celebrates local residents and their stories. Again, that idea of capturing in some way the intangible heritage of that community. This project was funded by Greater Birmingham and Solihull LEP, as I've said, but was also made possible with the funding and support of Transport for West Midlands and National Express West Midlands. The groups that we worked with on this project were the Soho Road Business District, who were absolutely integral in terms of bringing us, connecting us with the shopkeepers up and down the Soho Road, Handsworth Association of Schools, Black Heritage Walks Network again, BID Services, who work with, run the Deaf Cultural Centre in Handsworth, local businesses. So one of the bus stops, if you look carefully, you'll see the barber's scissors, you'll see the fabric shop, you'll see the jewellery store. That's captured in that work as well. Handsworth Library, Southern City College Birmingham and their Handsworth campus, and Holyhead School. Huge amount of flexibility required in terms of the way NALUPA worked with each of those different groups, which was really important. But ultimately, we were able to deliver a terrific project that not only saw us install the artwork, but also saw Transport for West Midlands pull out and upgrade all the bus stops along the Soho Road. So it had a really tangible effect on sort of upgrading that high street as well. So not just did it now look nice, but the bus stops are safer, they're better for access, a whole load of stuff like that. So I've been asked to touch a little bit on evaluation. Each of these projects obviously had its own creative community around it, and it has its own creative outputs. And it really felt like they were made with, by, and for the communities that we were working with. People loved them. We gathered a lot of feedback from online. We do online paper forms, but for something like the bus stops, we also use QR codes that are positioned at the bus stop so that anyone waiting for a bus can tell us, well, can find out about what the project is and why it's there, but also can tell us what they think about it. But these projects had a bunch of impacts that weren't just about the cultural aspect of it, that were really important to us as well. Well-being, so we were really interested in tracking the well-being of participants, particularly as this, for many people, this was a project that was kind of an emerging from lockdown project. We found it very useful to use pinwheel well-being surveys as part of that. So a simple kind of pinwheel where you can select various options about how you're feeling about the work, which we would do before and after each session, but also at the beginning, multiple points in the middle and at the end of each project. We looked at gathering data around the footfall along Soho Road, which we saw was increased. And we did that by doing surveys with local businesses, but also gathering data with our transport partners on bus travel during the period that the project was live. We worked with the police. We looked at the fact that there was reduced crime along the Soho Road and fewer reported instances of antisocial behaviour on buses. Now, obviously, I'm saying that that's to do with the project in the evaluation. We can't know for sure, but that's what the data is telling us. And a load of other outputs around, as I've mentioned, about street infrastructure being upgraded. In terms of one of our initial objectives about engaging target audiences with the show, I think it was also a successful way of working. These are again not necessarily the way that we would gather the data. This is the way the data was gathered through partners at the Commonwealth Games. But we found out that 47% of the audiences who came to the streets had never seen a Hippodrome show or a China Plate show before. So that's almost half of our audiences being new audiences. And 48% of that audience came from Black, South Asian, or mixed and multiple backgrounds. So a high proportion of our target audiences there. And we could also see that the highest number of audiences were coming from the hyper-diverse, low arts engagement areas where the projects were presented. So we were really getting local people, so delivering on that notion of culture on our doorstep. For us, it was also really interesting in terms of not just the success of participation, the way the participation worked, and that's sort of been built into our business model going forward, but also thinking about the way in which you can develop multiple pieces of work from one piece of IP. So even if your creative project isn't necessarily a heritage project, are there projects that can sit around it that are about heritage or about heritage of a particular place where the project is going? And also financially, so my last slide is just to say thank you to these guys, but it also opened up a whole load of new partnerships for us and a whole load of new income streams. So yes, I think that's probably my time up. That's to the streets.
Thank you so much, Paul. Like, that's amazing. It really speaks to how, you know, the idea of culture on your doorstep, for want of a better term, is really important, to not have the expectation that, you know, you want the audiences to come to you, but you actually have to go to them and do the work, you know, and being able to embed a project like that within communities that are considered, you know, traditionally excluded is a feat within itself. But what you did was produce tangible outcomes for them and a long-lasting impact, something that is still visible today, and you can still see the heritage. So thank you so much for that presentation. Just in terms of consciousness of time, we do have Stephanie in the building, and I'll let you introduce yourself. And Stephanie will be talking around accessibility in projects, in heritage projects. So I'll just hand over. Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for having me. Just want to check, how long have I got? Because I don't want to run over.
No, you've got your 20 minutes, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&As.
Okay, that's fine. Hi, everybody. I'm Steph Tyrrell, Head of Arts and Wellbeing for the disability charity Sense. I'm sat in my office. Well, it's not my office. I'm sat in a office in Selly Oak, where in our centre, Touch Base Pairs. And I'm going to be just giving you a really, really quick overview of a project that we've completed last year with a heritage project with the National Trust, exploring heritage and arts and culture with the people we support. Just in case you're not aware, Sense is a disability charity. We're 70 years old. We predominantly started out supporting deaf-blind children. We were set up by a group of mums, and then that's grown and evolved, and we now support people with a range of complex disabilities. We, as I said, we're national, and we have day services, we have residential homes, we have colleges, we have we run holidays and short breaks, children's program, early intervention program. So we're a really broad charity, and yeah, it's my privilege to lead the arts and wellbeing team into the offer. Just before we get started, are there any access requirements of the group? Do I need to auto describe any of the slides I'm showing?
We haven't received any, no.
Okay,
Stephanie.
fine. That's fine. Okay, so I'll share my screen. So if I go from beginning, is that a full page for you? No? Is it little page? It is. I can see some nods. Thank you so much. Right, let's try again. Right, okay, there we are. Let's go again. Is that full screen now? Yes, hooray. Okay, so this project was a collaboration with a few different partners. It was with Sense, National Trust, who I'm sure you all know, and with an artist, Justin Wiggin, who was based in Birmingham, but now is down in Cornwall. But Justin is a sound artist, and he has developed a piece of technology called Plant Wave, which I'll go into in a moment, which connects people and places to plant sounds and heritage. And it's quite a new model and quite an innovative model, and something that we thought would be really fundamental to our offer. And the way the technology works, we think expands the connections that the people we support have to plants and nature. So the project was a 2-year, let me just get myself set up. So the project was a 2-year offer, and within that programme, oh, let me go skip ahead. There we are. We invited the people we support along to different West Midlands properties that are in the National Trust. And we invited the people we support to the gardens in a way of connecting with plants and nature and heritage of that space. This programme started when we were coming out of lockdown, and we really wanted to get the people we support back out into nature, back out into the community. And as part of the National Trust strategic plan, Everybody Welcome, this seemed like the perfect opportunity for us to create a new partnership. And so the two organisations came together to think about how they diversify and welcome people with complex disabilities to their space. And so we were inspired by the William Morris collection at Whittick in Wolverhampton. And we were inspired by the kind of inside-outside concept of the gardens and designs of the location. And actually, we thought this was a really interesting heritage. Is a very untapped area for the people we support, and thinking about how do you bring somebody like William Morris closer to the people we support with the plants and nature of that space. So we set up this offer where we invited groups in for them to spend time in the garden and outside of the garden. We were also inspired by the different furniture that people connected to within the space, and also the wallpapers that they had on offer. And this is an image of the final installation that we created. But what the programme did was it offered training to National Trust staff for them to think about welcoming people with complex disabilities. So we looked at communication awareness for deafblind people. We did a breakdown of BSL training. We also looked at easy read maps. We looked at PECs as well. We kind of gave a really strong breakdown of different communication processes that the organisation would need to use to welcome the people we support. And this enabled National Trust volunteers or National Trust staff to feel more confident in welcoming people. And I think that was a really important part of the programme, that we were able to give that confidence for staff to think about how everybody access the space. So how the technology works, if I go to the next slide. So internal garden works by connecting biometric data readers onto plants, and that picks up the electrical impulses within plants. The technology plant wave that Justin uses, that then turns the biometric data from plants into sounds and into vibrations. And so through a process of explorative workshops within Croom in Worcestershire and Whittick in Wolverhampton, the people we support spent time to be in the garden, chill in the garden, have a picnic in the garden, and whichever plants they were drawn to through sensory exploration, we then connected up the plants to the biometric data, and we then created soundscapes. If you were to put one of the pads onto your hand and onto the plant, that then created a full loop of sounds. And the sounds and vibrations you would get back in response are completely unique to that person and to that garden. And so essentially what we were able to do, let me just skip forward. What we were able to do is create soundtracks of the people we support and the plants within the garden they connected to. And we created different soundscapes for audiences to experience. This was some feedback that we had back about some of our services within Birmingham going across to Croom. And it was a really brilliant opportunity for us to bring in to National Trust audiences the sense way of doing things, about putting people we support first within an experience. And I think that's what was really innovative about this offer, is that often the people we support are so often marginalised from community activities or from heritage, that actually having the emphasis on a non-verbal form of communication means that the people we support are the primary makers of the artwork, and then that opens up conversations for National Trust visitors, National Trust staff, for them to engage in the programme. I've got a picture of Justin here. So this is the artist that we'll work with that's designed the concept. So what we did over the course of the summer, we ran a series of workshops and sensory walks for the people we support, and they were delivering activities. That then meant that for other staff that were in the area, they were able to join in with the process, and for them to experience soundscapes created by the people that we supported. And so this is one of the National Trust volunteers. Based on the William Morris exploration, we shared the soundscape with the audiences, and they connected in via the headphones. And so first of all, they were able to experience artwork created by the people that we support, and then they themselves were able to have a go in the space themselves, and for them to replicate the experiences that we supported. Also, internal garden is a form of non-verbal communication, so anybody can connect with this and have a go. So and it's quite it was, as you can see here from the picture, it was quite an exciting offer. It was something a bit different in terms of the use of technology or the cause in which we're promoting. So people could come in, experience the connections to heritage. They could see, meet some of the people we support within the space. We also created, I'm just going to skip ahead slightly. We also created, here you can see some different groups experiencing. These are the senses here, and this plant way would then turn those senses into different soundscapes. Let me just go ahead. That's a nice pic, one of our artists. So then what we actually did here was create an easy read map of the garden. So the plants that were showcased in the soundscape, audiences visiting the National Trust could then go and walk the same path that the people we support had created, and also visit the same plants. So a particular tree or a particular shrub, they could stand next to that plant and experience the sounds created by the people we support. Or if somebody had a particular connection to that piece of heritage or to that part of the garden, it was emphasizing the achievements of that person and how they connected in that way. I think what was also interesting was that it made us also think about, what does heritage mean to us, and internalize, in some ways, some internalize ableism about heritage and what it means to visit the National Trust, or what it means to visit the gardens. Because for some of the people we support, this was a brand new venture for them. Actually just turning up on site, being in the minibus, getting there, maybe getting out of the minibus, going to have a cup of tea and then going home. That was actually quite an important part of that person's process and that connection. And so we would really like to explore the next, that's the team, us delivering the activities, but also to think about everybody's contribution and connection to heritage and all forms of communication to be celebrated. And so our next round that we want to go into, we would like more sites to experience our training, would like more sites to be more confident in welcoming people with complex disabilities, and we'd like to explore more opportunities for different connections to come in and be celebrated. And so that's the next part of the programme that we're looking into. Obviously, the people we support, some people have hearing and vision impairments. This actual piece is, this is a sub-pack vest. And so anybody that does have a hearing impairment, any sounds or vibrations or sound scores that would be created, they can use the sub-pack vest to feel the vibrations. And so some people that we support, they would just come and have quite a sensorial experience with the plants, with the heritage, with the soundscape, and they would just sit with the sub-pack vest and feel the vibrations of the sounds. But yeah, that's it. I've done a whistle stop tour. I can just, well, let me just whiz through quickly. There's loads of really lovely pictures here. But this was our actually maps are really important, and we were looking at the National Trust maps about how to access the garden and what's important to people. And so actually at the end of the project, we'd created the easy read maps so people could experience the internal garden installation. But then from an offshoot of the project is that people in our services actually wanted to go back and independently visit the gardens or visit the different areas they've explored, which is brilliant. So we've actually been piloting easy read maps for each of the properties as well and sharing that back with them. So through the programme, through the technology, through the approach, it's kind of taken, it's kind of opened up a wider conversation of access and a wider conversation of what do different locations and different spaces need to ensure that everybody can engage in a meaningful way. That's it. That's it. I could go on forever because it was such an amazing project, but that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It looks like an amazing project, actually. It definitely speaks to the investment principle around the use of technology to make things more accessible, make heritage more accessible. And that's like on an elevated like level, absolutely. And you must be so proud of that project. It would be, you know, such an amazing place, and especially when like heritage buildings, because they're so old, and heritage, the way we think about heritage, we don't often feel like we have enough empathy, and we do reinforce ableist attitudes, you know, when we go. So thank you so much for that. We have got, you know, around 10-15 minutes for some Q&As. Any questions? If anyone wants to ask any questions, or feel free to drop it in the chat if you want me to read them out for you. But thank you again to the presenters. The projects are really amazing, and I think it's just important to note that, you know, these are heritage focused projects, but were not necessarily funded under this new heritage lottery strategy. So just to be mindful that obviously the work that's been done has a heavy focus on inclusion, access and participation, but we're not funded necessarily under the new strategy now. But amazing inspiration for any new projects that any of you have. Have we got any questions? Any questions around the Cultivate Heritage project, around Moseley Road Baths, or To the Streets, China Plate, or To Sense? Oh.
If no one else has gone, I'll go. Sorry, I was looking for my hand up, but I couldn't find it.
Oh, right. Go ahead.
Thank you for free presentations. Brilliant. Learn a lot. As you said, inspirational, Charlene. It's a bit of a strange question, really, but and for all three, really, but especially for Charlene, because one of the interesting things is that you're simultaneously preserving and recycling heritage. Is there any sense either in the funding guidelines or in the projects, particularly yours, Stephanie, that non-humans have heritage too? So like the plants are a form of agents, or a building can have agency. And so that's something that we also need to protect. So because I'm trying to link the sustainability agenda with some of the things that were done. So if people wanted to speak a bit about thinking about non-human heritage and a sense of agency.
Anyone want to take this one? I think maybe Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of it in those terms before, so I'm getting my mind around that. But it's the because of the communication forms that we use with the people we support, we're always thinking about how can different ideas, concepts, which includes heritage, how can that be used in a experiential way? It's no for our guys, you know, we're not going to give we might give an easy read booklet or something, but we think about heritage in the non-traditional forms, and so that's where the idea of connecting with plants and nature, and yeah, we're all sensory beings. That's where the idea came from, and with this particular model, it kind of equalizes access to heritage in that way. So that's a big part of an inspiration that we want to take forward, of like the kind of mindfulness of being within those spaces is really key. But that does come from a mindfulness approach, but it's informed by the people we support and their experiences, and leaning into how they connect with the world around them. I don't know if that's answered your question, but that's what springs to mind.
Yeah, great. I thought of them actually as co-producers in a way that they have produced a piece of this together. I mean, it's lovely in that way, but yeah.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting question. I've never even thought about non-human heritage before in that kind of way. I definitely do not have the answer to that, and I wouldn't want to comment on it, just on the basis that obviously Heritage Lottery, you know, they have quite a particular way of, you know, projects. But with that in mind, there's still an opportunity if you want to have a one-to-one advice session with them. That's something you can do whilst you're engaging with this program. So let me know if there's a project idea you have, and we could definitely look at, you know, engaging with them to get some advice, some early development advice from Heritage Lottery. So yeah, have we got any other questions? I know everyone's starting to drop off now. But have we got any more questions? No. I mean, well, we've got like 10 minutes added back to our diaries if you want to take them back. But just before we go, I know lots of people have fallen off now, but we do have a feedback form, but I will email this out to all of the people that attended. But again, I just want to give a really big thank you to Phoebe and Paul and Stephanie for presenting today. Such amazing projects. This is recorded, so this will be published. So those people that registered that weren't able to attend can also get to see it and get some inspiration from your project. Are we all right to give your contact details to people as well if they wanted to get in touch? Is that okay? Brilliant. But thank you again, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you at the networking event, which I'll tell everybody about in an email. But enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Thank you.